Okay. So we've got some people showing up. So as a welcome for those of you that are joining us right now, I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes to settle in before I start my official spiel about what's happening. So welcome, Caroline.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here to the best bookstore in the country, voted by PW.
Oh, we are absolutely over the moon about that. It is considering there's close to 3,000 books, independent bookstores in the country.
Wow.
And we were voted by, and it was by our peers. Somebody had to nominate us and do that whole thing, and PW chose us, and so we're
It's
ecstatic about it.
incredible. I also want to say that I'm also thrilled to be here with my literary heroine, Joan Silber.
I was going to say hello to Joan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, oh no,
I got there first.
You got there first. We're thrilled that Joan's here too. Hi, Joan.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here.
So I always love to ask, as people are settling into, for those that don't know, Warwick's is located in La Jolla, which is just a little bit north of San Diego. We're having some beautiful weather here today. It's probably in the mid to high 60s here today. Pretty clear skies out there. Caroline, where are you calling in from?
Hoboken, New Jersey.
Okay.
Manhattan's unofficial sixth borough, and it's blue skies, sunny, nice weather, quiet today. Anyway,
today. Yeah, that's a good thing. And Joan, where are you calling in from?
I am in New York on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Cool weather. I have a dog, so I'm always out in whatever the weather is. So it's been on the verge of rain, but quite nice now. So
I love that. So that is super fun. I mean, you just never know what the weather and what things are going to be any place these days. I mean, it's a hard one. I'm going to turn on the chat so that if anybody wants to let us know where you're calling in from, we always love to hear that too. So the chat's on for everybody to talk. So speaking of the chat, I'm going to put in, we're here today. Who's got a copy of the book? Days of Wonder is right.
I do.
There it is. Days of Wonder. I'm going to put it how to order. So Janet's here from LA.
Hi.
So glad you're here. So I'm going to put in the chat how to order the book. Like I said, we're located in San Diego. We can ship anywhere in the United States. If you happen to be joining us from somewhere outside of that, you'll find a local bookstore that you can buy your book at. But I'll be putting on how to order Days of Wonder in the chat there. We could ship it. If you're in the San Diego area, we'd love for you to come into the store because there's lots of great things to buy at Warwick's. The 128 years old. So we've got quite a history and lots of things there to buy. Caroline and Joan are going to chat for about 30 minutes when I go off screen. At the bottom of your screen is, I know we all know all this, but I still have to do my due diligence. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So go ahead and pop questions in there, and we will get to those after Joan and Caroline have their wonderful conversation. So with that, I'm going to introduce these lovely ladies and go off screen so we can hear about this book and all kinds of wonderful things. So Caroline Leavitt is the award-winning author of 12 novels, including the New York Times bestseller Pictures of You. A book critic for People magazine, her essays, articles, and stories have been included in New York Magazine, Modern Love in the New York Times, Salon, and the Daily Beast, among others. The recipient of a New York Foundation of the Arts Award for Fiction and a Sundance Screenwriters Lab finalist. She is also the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, which is still going stronger than ever. If you don't know what that is, go look it up on Facebook because I'm sure all of you know what it is, but go look at that. She's here today, like we said, to talk about her new book, Days of Wonder. And joining her is the wonderful Joan Silber. Joan is the author of 9 books of fiction, most recently Secrets of Happiness. Her novel Improvement won the National Book Critics Circle Award and the PEN Faulkner Award, and she received the PEN Malamud Award for Excellence in the Short Story. Her new novel, Mercy, we're getting like a sneak peek here, will be out in 2025. And like she said, she lives in New York and also for many years, and taught for many years at Sarah Lawrence College and in the Warren Wilson MFA program. Ladies, have a great conversation. I'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
my first question is actually a kind of crucial one for this book. This is a book about someone who is coming out of prison as the book
Mhm.
starts. So I read that this novel was based on a true event. Is this true?
It is true. I was having dinner with a new woman friend that somebody had introduced me to, and they said, "Oh, you'll love her. She's this great woman," and she was, and I really liked her. And it was after we had known each other for about a year when she said, "Caroline, I have to tell you something." And of course, I immediately thought, "Uh-oh, something is going on. I hope it's not illness." And she told me that when she was 15, she had murdered somebody. And I sat there in shock. And she said, "Yeah, I did. I really did it. I was 15." She was, she was wild, like a car without brakes. And she was given a lengthy prison sentence in a woman's prison. And once she was in prison, she vowed that what she was going to do was she was going to change her life entirely. She began to take, she finished high school in prison. She got a college degree in prison. She became a peer leader. And her behavior was so incredible that she was early released. And when she was, she moved out of the country where she was living. She changed her name. She took on a new profession. And she was cautiously living a happy life until she hit her 40s when somebody found out about her and outed her. And it became kind of a media sensation. And there was all this tabloid stuff going on. And she lost friends. She lost her job. She had to start all over again and change her identity again. And the thing that struck me about the story was how haunted she was, that people kept thinking of her as that 15-year-old girl who had had the capacity to murder somebody, when actually she was a 40-year-old woman who, was a totally different personality. And that story just captured me, but I didn't want to make things tough for my friend. So we talked about it for a while, and I promised her, I swore, that I would never give away any details that would lead anybody to know who she was, and that I was going to change every single aspect of her story to a different story. So it would have the basic theme there of, what does it really mean to be innocent? And what does it really mean to be guilty? And I turned it into more of a Romeo and Juliet story with two 15-year-old New York City kids. Um, and they're both involved in an attempted murder instead of a murder that neither one can remember. And in that way, I sort of was able to write about what I wanted to write about without hurting my friend. And yes, she does know about the book, and we don't talk about it. I don't know if she's read it, but I'm sure if she had, she would have said something to me.
Yeah. That's amazing. Um I'm sort of interested in how you did it once you had, this degree of information. And I know that I was on the Penn Prison Writing Committee for a long time.
Mhm.
So, and we gave awards to prisoners who wrote, and were very actively encouraging prisoners to write, because it's so vital. And I know you worked with Jean Trudenstein, author and prison activist,
Mhm.
and researching women in prison. So how did you go about that? What were the things that got in the way? Where did it go well?
It was pretty amazing. I mean, I was looking for women to speak to, and it was a lot of them were very guarded, and the prisons don't really like you to come in there if you're a writer unless you're teaching a class. So somebody got me to Jean, and Jean said, "Well, I teach this class called Changing Lives Through Literature." And it's at Framingham, Massachusetts. And what happens is that the women who are on probation or parole, as part of their probation or parole, they must read a work of literature and they must talk about it. And in that way, they talk about their lives. And she said, "Well, would you like to come to a class?" And I said, "Oh my God, of course I want to come to a class." So I went down to Massachusetts, and it was very surreal. The classes were held in a special, they weren't held in a prison, they were held, I forget where they were held exactly, but there were 15 women. And as soon as I walked in, the women were very guarded and they were looking at me. And I was a little nervous, but I noticed that they were bringing candy bars and putting them in the middle of the circle they had formed. And I thought, well, that's cool. And I asked, could I have a candy? And as soon as I did, they were watching me. And when I chose a Snickers, one of the women said, that's the best candy. You chose wisely. And everybody laughed, and it got a little better. And I listened to the women talk about literature, and it was really interesting because you could tell what their inner turmoil was about by what they were talking about, whether it was about a male controlling them, or whether it was about being abused in some way. So at the end of the class, I told them, look, I'm writing this book about this young woman who's in prison, and I want it to be accurate. Can I talk to you? And they all went silent. And then one of them said, this is going to be like Orange is the New Black. We're not telling you anything. And I assured them that it was not going to be sensationalized, that I wanted to honor them. And they slowly started to open up. And their stories were amazing, amazing, amazing. I not just in the bonds that these women formed with each other and real friendships, but the things they actually did for each other. One woman told me that their favorite thing to do was to get some dish liquid from the commissary and pour it on the floor, and then you had a slip and slide. And the guards allowed them to do that for hours on end. And the other thing that really interested me was that these women relied on knitting. And I kept thinking, really? Because knitting needles are really sharp. You can take someone's eye out with that. And the women said, no, they were the knitting needles were sacred, because the women would sit and knit, and it was something they could all do and see the fruits of their labor. It bonded them together because they would talk as they knit, and eventually they would sell whatever they made to the guards or to visitors. And Jean told me that one woman actually had a knitting business when she got out of prison. She did really well. But anyway, I've stayed in touch with all of these women, most of these women, not all of them, most of them since then, and they're all doing well. And they're all incredibly resilient and incredibly brave. And I wanted to present that back because I think that anyone can make a mistake. You never know what is going to happen in your life and how it's going to turn out. And the important thing is what you do after you've made that mistake.
Yes, yes. Oh, well, a lot. I'm just looking at my questions, and I have another good one, but I'm going to wait for this. A lot of Days of Wonder revolves around the feeling most of us have at various points of being outsiders. Particularly writers have that idea. And in this book, Helen, the mother of Ella, the young girl who has been in prison, was herself booted out of the Hasidic community in Williamsburg after she got pregnant. Pregnant as a result of a rape, but she was still thrown out,
Right.
and she's missed the closeness of that community, despite its treatment of her. What did you discover about, I say this as the person who lives on the Lower East Side, right? What did you discover about this community, and how it affected your character?
Again, I had to have help because, if I live near Williamsburg, and if you go into Williamsburg, the Hasidic people they'll be very polite, but they're not very open to you, and they don't want to be treated like zoo animals. There's a lot of people who just stare at them. So I decided I needed to find some women who had left the community. And I found these two incredible, incredible women. The first one is this woman named Beatrice Weber. And Beatrice got married in the Hasidic community, and she wanted to be married. She loved the community. When she was 16, I believe, she had 13 kids, one right after the other, and she wanted all that, absolutely wanted all that, and was happy. And then gradually she began to see the outside world sort of stepping closer and closer to her. And she told her husband that she was thinking she wanted to go to college. And he said, well, if you do that, I'm divorcing you. And if I divorce you, I'm getting custody of the kids and you won't see them anymore. So Beatrice stayed for a little while, and then it just got too much for her. So she worked something out with her husband where she could see one of the kids, one of the boys, but he still had to go to the Hasidic yeshiva. He still had to dress the way they dressed while she was dressed in a very secular fashion. And she did this remarkable thing, which was that when she noticed that the yeshiva schools were not doing well enough in education, she sued the city of New York to get them better education, and she won. She won. The other amazing thing about her is she empowers women now, and she helps women leave the community. I asked her, is there anything that you miss from this community? And it really got to me because she said what she really missed was the sense of community. You're not an outsider in that community, you're an insider. The danger is the outsiders, who are everyone else who is not Hasidic, who they believe are trying to destroy them. And she said there's something very comforting about that, because if you don't have enough money for a wedding, the whole community will come together and throw you a lavish one. If someone is sick and you don't have money for a doctor, community comes together. They will take care of you from birth. If you're older and your husband dies, they will find you a new husband, because you have to have one in the community. So the second woman that I found who was even just as interesting was this novelist, Leah Lax, who wrote this book called Unbound. And what was really fascinating about Leah is she's the only person I discovered who actually started out not Hasidic. When she was 14 or so, she began to realize that she might be gay. And she was living in Texas in a very little town, and that was very frightening for her. And she decided the way to deal with that was not to deal with it. So she joined a Hasidic community, again, got married at 17, had a million kids. And then she decided, after a while, that she just couldn't do it anymore, that she was sort of denying who she was. And so she left the community too, and she lost contact with a lot of her kids. She sends them money every year. Sometimes the envelopes are returned, sometimes they're not. And she's become a prolific writer, and she writes plays. And I asked her the same question: do you miss anything about the community? And she said the same thing that Beatrice told me, which is it's that feeling that you're not an outsider, you belong, you're part of this community, and you're all connected no matter, and the only way you're unconnected is if you do something that disconnects you from the community. You always have to stay on the path. So I had all this research, and I had both of these women read every page I wrote, and I made a lot of mistakes. There were things like people were wearing things they wouldn't read. They were reading things they weren't supposed to read, or they were doing things, and I had to sort of figure it out, like how to make it work and how somebody would feel, because it's a whole cultural thing from the beginning. So there was a whole lot of rewriting, but it was really interesting. It's really, really fascinating.
Thank you. I love hearing that. So I have to ask you about this story I read about you thinking about dropping out of Brandeis. You're a writer in Paris, great idea. And the Brandeis professor who very wittily got you to change your mind. Tell that story.
This totally changed my life. I was at Brandeis, and I was taking a creative writing class with this famous at the time professor who was really cruel, and he literally would destroy me in every class. And I decided, well, screw you. I'm going to drop out of school, go to Paris, and be a writer, and you'll see. So I went to the dean at Brandeis and said, I'm dropping out. And she said, no, you can't just drop out. She said, you have to talk to 3 professors in the English department, and then you have to come back and talk to me. And I said, fine, but you're not going to change my mind. So the first one, of course, yelled at me and said, you're giving up a world-class education. Do you know how many people would kill to get into Brandeis, and you're walking away? So I tuned him out. The second one said, what are you, crazy? You can't be a college dropout. This is a terrible idea, and you'll be miserable in Paris. And I tuned him out too. The third one was this professor named Alan Levitan, and he came in this cape, And he looked at me really curiously. You know, he wasn't yelling or anything. He just said, "So, you're thinking of going to Paris to be a writer. That's so interesting." And I thought, oh, this is somebody who gets me. He gets me. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, well, that's really interesting. So where are you going to live? And I said, right in the center of Paris. And he said, well, you know, the center of Paris is probably really expensive, but that's okay because you probably can afford a really nice place with a bunch of roommates 2 hours from the city. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. And he said, and it'll be fine because on the 2 hour train ride, you'll be able to write. And he said, what are you going to do for a job? And I said, oh, I'm going to waitress. And he said, oh, that's great. You'll meet a lot of interesting people. And how's your French? And as soon as he stopped that, I said, well, I don't really speak French, but I'll learn it when I'm there. And he kept asking me question after question. And then finally, his last question was, so what do you know, I'm very excited for you about doing this. I think this is a great idea, but what are you doing when you're done talking to me? And I said, well, I don't have any more classes. And he said, so what are you going to do today? I said, well, I'll probably go out on the lawn, the great lawn, and just write. And he said, oh, that's interesting. So when I left, I realized, okay, I'm not going to go to Paris. This is not going to work. I'm going to have to work harder at being a writer. And I thought that story was over, but it wasn't, because being a young, selfish kid, I never thought to thank him, and I always wanted to, and I never could find him. So 2 months ago, I got a call from Brandeis, and they wanted me to write a piece about the best education I got at Brandeis. And I thought, oh, I have a story for you. So I wrote about Alan. And I asked them if they knew where he was, and they said, no, we really don't. He must be in his late 80s now. And I said, okay, well, I hope he sees this. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, they called me up and they said, Alan called us. He wants you to call him. So I called Alan, that was 3 months ago. He's in Boston. He invited me to tea, and I'm actually going to tea when I'm there for a reading in 2 weeks. We've become fast friends, and I got to thank him, you know, on email. I'm going to thank him in person. And he's this amazing person. He's lived this great life, and he showed me how to talk to people if you think they're not doing the right thing, but they need to figure it out themselves
Right.
rather than you telling them. And that was just such a great gift. And he's a Shakespearean scholar, and I cannot wait to see him. Just can't wait.
That is a wonderful story.
It is a wonderful story, and he's wonderful. He's totally wonderful.
I wish you a fabulous tea. I know you will have it.
I know. I hope so too.
So my next question is really, what kind of writer are you in the sense of how you work? Do you structure things, and do you have to research first? What's the order in which you do stuff?
Oh God, it's all over the place. Usually it starts with something or some idea that's haunting me personally. And I just become obsessed with why it's haunting me. Like, what is it about it that I need to know or that I want to write about? And then it starts with character. I just have images of these characters in my mind, and I'm not quite sure what they're going to do. Um, I do a lot of both. I mean, I will try to write out an outline, which I rip up about 18 times because, you know, that's not really how writing progresses. Um, and the outline changes constantly, and I try not to. I used to do all my research first, and then I found out I was doing nothing but research, and I wasn't happy. I prefer to do the writing, and then while I'm doing the writing, then I'll remember, oh, I don't know what kind of canapes people ate at a 1923 party, so I'll research that. Then I can go back to what I love, which is the writing. But I'm curious how you write, because your books are so seamless and so gorgeous and beautifully crafted. I mean, they just do me in the best way.
For the most part, I make them up as I go along rather than
Okay.
having a whole sort of schema worked out. But I do take notes before I start. I roughly know what's going to happen. in each chapter. But I love the research. I'm like, oh, I don't have to
Oh,
write.
really?
I can look up what the canapes were. I
It's
love that part of
interesting.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of it's really, really fabulous little details that, I guess you can use it as small talk at a party. Like, what did they have in the 1950s before they had crime tape, yellow crime tape? They had sawhorses. That's how you knew not to cross it. And to me, that's fast. It's like time traveling.
Oh, I love that. I love those details. And also they help me think of stuff. If
Right.
I'm imagining, people crossing the street and that's part of it, then the scene of them crossing the street is that much more vivid for me. It's very helpful, actually.
It
Um,
is helpful. It is helpful. Do you know about, oh, I have to find the name of this place for you. There's something on social media. I think it's on TikTok and it's called something like Living History, where they have it from the late 1800s on, where somebody set up a camera and they filmed people just on the street. And the
ooh,
people on the street know they're being filmed, but of course they don't see themselves in the camera. But you see these extraordinary scenes of, young kids in newsboy caps, and it's very eerie because they're alive for that moment on the film.
yes. Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm going to look that up.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I'll get you the link. I'll get you the link. You'll love it.
Thank you. So you teach novel writing through the UCLA Writers Program. What is the best advice you give your students? And what would be the worst? Not the
Worst
worst, but
advice, the worst advice is always giving up.
yes, that's right.
Don't give
That's
up.
right.
Like, do not give up. The best advice is always, the worst advice is give up. The best advice is always do not give up. If you have a bad writing day, you know what? Your subconscious is percolating. Maybe the next day will be better. The other advice would be no does not always mean no. I've had things. One of my first successful books was rejected on contract by my then publisher as not being special enough. And I just thought my career is over. Nobody knows who I am. I don't have sales. I'm never going to be published again. And then all of a sudden a friend hooked me up with Algonquin and I had my first New York Times bestseller. So you never know. It all depends on, like, the only thing you really should be doing at first is writing the book that you really want to write, that you
Mhm.
really want to read, that's not following the market, because that's not what you really want to write, probably. You want to write something that's deeper and more intimate, and to just persevere. It's a hard profession, but it's a wonderful profession, and you just have to keep going.
I always tell people that it requires great stubbornness.
Yes.
That's really aside from talent, the stubbornness is one thing, and every single writer that students admire and think is the greatest thing in the world has suffered those rejections. There's
That's
no one
right.
who doesn't have that as part of the experience. So that's important that people know that, I think.
Yeah, it is.
That uh, people say, you'll feel better if you do it, so do it. Also, that putting it
Right.
off is not a form of
No, it's not a good thing. It's not a
yeah,
good thing.
yeah. Um, my other advice is resist bad advice, because I
Oh,
think
I love that. That's even better than mine. That's right. Resist it. Sometimes people tell you stuff with great authority. And I always think, well, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right to me. You can buck what everybody else says.
and there's a lot of absolutist advice, like, oh, you can
Mhm.
never do this and never do that, and that's
Right. And
actually is
that's
not like that.
no,
Yeah,
no.
it's not a science. Um, Oh, and you have described, no, I don't even believe this, but you have allegedly described yourself as the shyest introvert
Oh, I am.
on the planet.
I
Yeah,
am.
I mean, I see you as very social. You co-founded Blaze, which interviews writers. And you did that during lockdown when everybody was sort of, not minding being home in my case. So how did you get yourself across that line so that you are social?
It was very hard. It was really hard. It was when I first started with Algonquin and they sent me on a tour, my first tour, and I was terrified. And I thought, what am I going to say to people? How am I going to act? What are they thinking? And one of my friends said, you need a talisman. You need something which is going to make you feel like you know, this is something that a really strong, brave, bold woman would do, and you'll become that person. So I looked around and I was looking on eBay and I found a pair of these $10 little short cowboy boots. And I thought, you know what? If I walked out on stage wearing those, everybody would think, there's a woman who's not afraid of anything. So I bought the boots. And I wore them, and it took a while. The first time I was really nervous, but after a while, I started feeling like I was that woman, that I could walk out there and nobody was going to tell me anything was bad. And the funniest thing is, people began coming to my readings wearing cowboy boots too. And I thought, that's so weird. That's so weird. And the thing is, I still have all the boots and I don't really wear them anymore. But I learned that the way I handle my shyness is I make myself do things. If I go to a party, I tell myself, okay, all you have to do is go up to two people you don't know and put your hand on and say, hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. Who are you? And talk to them for a few minutes. And it became easier and easier for me. And, you know, with the Blaze, it was the same thing. I was terrified. The first person I interviewed was John Irving, and I was absolutely terrified. Um, but he was very gracious and very kind. And when it was over, I thought, that wasn't so hard. You know, I can do that. And I've sort of made that my mantra. I can do this. I can do this. But I'm still like I'm less shy than I was and less of an introvert. But that's my go-to way of being shy and introvert. I like having lunches with people one-on-one, but I don't like parties. Parties makes me I want to like go to the kitchen and hide.
Do you think that's a writerly thing that we like the intimacy of a one-to-one thing rather than the group event?
I do. And because I've talked about this with other writers, and most of them feel the same way that we're all really interested in people, and we all really love those deep, intimate conversations that you have with another human being where you can express yourself and learn things, but you can't have those conversations at a party very well. Or if you're sitting at a table with 20 other writers, it's hard. It's not, and so you walk away and it's not the same kind of feeling like, oh, I got to know another human being better.
I'm just thinking that what the discussion that we began this with is how you got the idea for this book. And that was through someone's telling you very intimate stuff about
Mhm.
having committed a terrible crime when she was very young. I mean, so that, that feeds, and who would guess that about anyone that they're talking to?
I know.
That intimacy feeds our writing, I think.
I think it feeds our writing too. It's when people are there's another thing that I learned that I used to have great shame about a lot of things about myself. And I learned that when I spoke about them or when I told people about it, it's like it puts a light on the shame and sort of shrivels up. And so I've come to believe that the more truthful that you can be about what you feel or who you are or what you want, without worrying about, well, what are people going to think about me? Are they not going to like me? Are they going to think I'm stupid? The better it is for you. And it also helps other people, because when I started talking about things that I was ashamed of, people would come up to me afterwards and say, oh my God, me too. I have that same shame. Thank you for saying that. And then I would say, well, I hope you can say it too, because it really is free. It really is freeing. It really is freeing.
I think when we talk about the minor, not attempted murder, but actual minor things that we're ashamed about, we're often comic about it too.
Yes.
Joke about this, stupid thing you did, and that's very helpful. I mean, comedy has great purposes, right? It gets under it, it gets the ironies of it, the contradictions, and I love that. I think it's very helpful.
Right, absolutely. You have to claim it, you know? And also if you can laugh about it, then it becomes more of a friend than an enemy that's gonna hurt you.
It's a great way to put it, actually. I have um this is a great question after what we just said. So there's a lot in the book about what guilt and innocence really mean,
Right,
both legally and personally.
right.
And you also raise the question of who gets to be forgiven, which is like the
Right.
question, right, of human life. Who gets to be forgiven for a crime committed many years ago. There's a big difference between, for instance, Charles Manson,
Mhm.
who said if he were to be let out, he would go on another killing spree. I believe
That's
him,
right.
unfortunately. And Leslie Van Houten, who was one of the young women he got to follow him, one of the Manson girls. She was one of them who got a college degree while in prison and became a peer leader and tried to become a totally different person than when she was the teenager he enlisted.
Mhm.
So maybe you could talk about what forgiveness means within the book that you just wrote, and in a more general sense too. I'd love to hear this.
Yeah, to me, the whole thing with I did a lot of research on the Mansons when I was writing Cruel, Beautiful World and Leslie Van Houten. And to me, it has to do with, everybody in America. I think it was Fitzgerald who said there's no second acts really in America. And the thing is, we don't want, a lot of people don't want there to be second acts. Leslie Van Houten at 17 is not Leslie Van Houten in her 70s or however old she is. It's a totally different, changed person. Forgiving her or forgiving anybody does not mean that you forget what the person did. It's still a fact. It's still something that that person has to live with. But what matters in terms of forgiveness is how the person is living their lives now. I mean, there's like the whole thing with guilt and innocence is with Ella spends a whole lot of the book wondering, did she do this thing or didn't she do this thing? And if she didn't do this thing, what if she had wanted to do that thing? Does that make her guilty? And I found that really interesting because it seems so human to me. And also, I'm a big believer in that we can change. It's really hard, but we can change. That doesn't mean you erase your past or you erase anything bad that you did. It just means that you have to look at it as, well, that was my past. It's like we're not 5-year-old children anymore. We're adults. Our whole bodies and cells are different. And the way we can ease what we did if we do something bad is by, you know, just even little things like being kind, living a good life, making amends, thinking about people differently. I think it's a, I think it's harmful when all these women come out of prison with the label that they're a felon, and that feeling that Ella is, she's let out on a technicality, a botched case, but she's still a felon. And just that word that, yeah, well, I'm a felon, it brings up all kinds of things for people that may not be who you are now.
Okay, last question, which is simply, what are you obsessed about now? What are you thinking about now?
You know what I'm really thinking about now? Vegan cheese. Vegan cheese.
Right.
I've been a vegetarian for years, and I felt healthier. It wasn't that I didn't, and I never really liked meat anyway. Um, and I've been trying out vegan cheese, and it all tastes like shoe leather. It's all so completely disgusting that it's appalling. But I'm sort of like, they always say there's a sucker born every minute. I see those ads coming off on Facebook saying, oh, a new vegan cheese, it's so delicious, chefs use it. And I spend the money to get it. And sure enough, I get it home and it's shoe leather again. So that's
I've had better vegan cheese. I would just like to say sometimes
better
it's,
vegan cheese, yes.
yeah, we'll discuss this later.
Okay.
That's a hilarious way to end the conversation. Was waiting for some like very profound,
It is profound though. Cheese is important. Do you know anybody who doesn't love cheese?
No, I'm obsessed with it. So. I absolutely love that. I just have to say, Caroline and Joan, you said it, you are an amazing storyteller, because the way that you started this conversation, just dropping the bomb of, well, this 50-year-old girl was a customer. It was like, I was like in my chair doing this to the screen. It's incredible. And then your story about Alan. Oh my God.
Oh, he's so wonderful. I
Oh,
like to say his name because then I can email him after this and say, guess what, Alan? I mentioned your name at Warwick's Books, and he'll be so thrilled.
oh, amazing. So we do have some questions that came in.
Okay.
I was noticing on the chat too, and one of them is from Jenny, who's in Australia, by the way.
Oh, great.
So in Australia, it's like I love that we just gather people from all over the world on this. It just is amazing. That's what I love about doing these events. And I looked it up, Jenny. I think it's around 9:30 or so in the morning there. So it's not like it's any too late in the middle of the night. So her question is, she's fascinated that Caroline says she has to know the last line of her book while she's writing it. She can't imagine knowing that before she's actually writing the ending.
That doesn't mean that I know the ending of the book. It just means that I sort of have an idea of where I want things to end up. And to me, the first line and the last line of a book are so important. And if I have the first line and the last line, then I feel like, well, I can't throw this in the trash because I did too much on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's for sure, because it's just, but that is, I think, I mean, and you've interviewed a ton of authors. I've sat through a ton of these, knowing a place to go. I can't imagine not knowing a place to go.
Right.
That would just be, but trust me, I'm not a writer. I'm a very, very good reader, though. Very
Just as important. Just as important.
Exactly. So you all are feeding this bad habit over. That is very good habit, I should say. Okay, so Julie has a question. She says, hello to you, Caroline. This book has a gorgeous cover. So can you talk about why you chose that cover?
I didn't choose it. I'm notoriously bad with titles and with covers. And with all the books I've done with Algonquin, they've changed my covers a million times and they've made me come up with new titles. I fought for the title of Days of Wonder because I just felt like I wanted to call the book that. They just asked me what I wanted to see on the cover and what kind of designs I liked. And I, of course, had no idea whatsoever. I said, I just wanted to look, I don't know. And so this was actually the first cover they showed me. And I looked at it and I thought, that's the cover, that's the cover.
I
So
think you kind of know though, right? When you see something, it's
when you see it, and the more I looked at it, the more I liked it. I mean, there's just something about it. But before I got to Algonquin, I've had some covers that I really didn't like at all. I had one where the hardback was a really gorgeous cover and it looked like an Edward Hopper painting. Just this man sitting in a diner late at night and there's like some stars and he's feeding a baby. And I said, oh, I love that. That's a great cover. When the paperback came out, it was pink and green, mint green. And it had a woman's nightgown hanging on a peg. And inside the nightgown, there was like a little picture of this guy who looked like he was in GQ smiling. And I thought, who is this guy? He's not in the novel. And why is there a nightgown? What has this got to do? And I argued and they said, no, we like it. We're going to use it. And to this day, I'm still ashamed of that cover.
It's got to be horrible.
It's terrible. It's horrible. It's horrible.
This is your work. This is your art between those pages. Oh, that has to be a horrible feeling to have.
It's a terrible feeling.
Oh God, yeah. Because you want to like your bookcase in the back. It's like, oh, you books. You want to look at your beautiful books. It's like, well.
Yeah.
Say something about why you gave it the title.
Yeah, I just, I'm really bad with titles. As I said, they've all changed. There's something about the word wonder that I've been thinking about over the past few years because I always feel like I'm in a kind of state of wonder because my life has always been a series of these terrible, appalling tragedies followed by these miraculous, wonderful, terrific events. And I kind of always feel sort of wonder about that, it's kind of like you can choose to stay with the terrible events, or you can choose the wonder and say like, well, this amazing thing happened and it came out of this terrible thing. And I just sort of feel that that's the way my life goes. And the way that I keep things happy is by being in this state of wonder. I wanted it to be Days of Wonder because there's very specific days in the book that influence the characters. There's, 3 different versions of the day of the attempted murder. There's a day when certain things are realized that turns their life upside down. And there's always that moment when you're at the crossroads of, well, how are you going to react to that? Like, how are you going to react to that? Are you going to do the wrong thing, or are you going to just approach it with wonder? And I try to do the wonder.
I love it. I love that. Okay. Now Janet has a question.
Okay.
So she loves, quote, all over the place about your process. She was told long ago regarding fiction to do research, then forget it and write, that the info is there within you. So she's found that to be true. She'd like to ask both of you if you find that to be true.
I'm
going to let Joan answer first.
I would say no, it's not true. I mean, I certainly, I try not to consult the research too closely because nobody wants, everything to be kind of what my students call an info dump, where you're getting all this information and it's interrupting the story. So you do have to absorb it in some way, and you certainly have to pick and choose what you use. I mean, there are all these great facts that don't exactly fit into your story, and you have to, exercise some caution about that. But I do go back and look at what I took notes on, which is already a kind of selection, and what looked interesting to me, what I wanted to use. So I don't have it all by heart, so it's a kind of back and forth process, but I love the process. I really love doing research.
Yeah, I agree with Joan. I think, in fact, the writer Mary Morris told me that the key to research is not to find the facts so much, but to look for the stories. So a lot of times when I'm, like researching, or I might be reading a book about the 20s now, I have things that I don't know if they're going to fit in the novel or how they will, or if they will, but they're interesting to me. And it's sort of, I think about it. A lot of times I will do research as I'm writing, where I know what the scene is supposed to be, and all of a sudden I can't figure out what kind of shoes somebody would wear in the 1920s. So I have to research that, and that usually leads to something else that's interesting. I'm always researching right up to the copy editing stage, when the copy editor is asking, was this really true? Go back and find out. It's a process, and I find it tremendously interesting. You get to live other lives, you really do.
Yes.
Oh shoot, I was thinking of something that I was just going to ask you, and it just flew right out of my brain. So, oh well. That's just the way it seems to go these days. Joan, I have to ask you a question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot in any way, but when I was researching a little bit before we all came on here, I saw that you wrote an article about, and I won't put you on the spot, but it was about one of my favorite authors, Elliot Ackerman, Red Dress in Black and White.
Yeah.
Did you love that book? Did you?
It was a review. I mean, it wasn't,
okay.
I didn't get to see him. I just
okay.
But I liked the book very much. Absolutely. Yeah.
He is we posted him on this before. And if anybody hasn't read Red Dress in Black and White, it is an amazing book. He is absolutely incredible. So, well, ladies, I think we've come into our end here. It's so wonderful to have both of you. Caroline, oh, that's what I was going to ask you, Caroline. So you just were talking a little bit about some of your research. Is your new book set? Do you have some things about your new book that you would like to share with us?
No, I don't want to share anything. I can't.
I can't get the scoop, you guys.
I can't give you the scoop. I will give you the scoop when it's later.
But you are working on something new.
Oh yeah. I'm at that torn between two lovers stage. I don't know if you do that, Joan, where I have one book that's just about finished, and I just started another one before I finished the one that's just about finished. So I'm sort of juggling both of them. Well, although right now I'm not really writing because I'm promoting, which
and that's hard to do because you've got to go back to something that you've written like a year ago or more. And try and get back in that mindset.
And you're using the more public side of your personality, so it's very different from
it's very exactly right.
Yeah,
exactly right.
And Joan, we'll have your book to look forward to next.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Can't wait for that.
I have a few little revisions to do, and then it will be totally done very soon.
Oh,
So
that's incredible.
So exciting.
Congratulations, Joan. That's amazing.
thank you.
Well, thank you, Caroline. Days of Wonder. It's in the link. This will be on YouTube later, so we'll put the link there as well. All the best to you. Always love seeing you. And Joan, it was wonderful meeting you. Hope to see you. Maybe we'll see you here next year for your book.
I would love
Oh,
that. Yes.
excellent. Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you so much, Joan. And thank you everybody who came to this and who asked such great questions.
Excellent. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.